First of all, Ai Weiwei, thanks for giving us the chance of speaking with you now that you are undergoing your first exhibition in Chile. I would like to begin with something about your father. Your father, the poet Ai King, regarded as a dissident in communist China, was a friend of Pablo Neruda and visited Chile and his house in Isla Negra during the 1950s. As far as I know, this friendship was important for your father, and the memory of his visit to Chile remains significant until the end of his life. Because he was a very important formative influence in your life, I would like to ask you about your relationship with Chile.
My relationship with Chile it started with imagination. My father told me the stories when he was in exile. So about 10 years old, I hear him. I still remember he talks about Pablo Neruda, and in our household a lot of photos because it's a state visit. They take a lot of photographs, and those photographs have a strong impression about the nature, the people. For me, it's very foreign because we are in Gobi Desert, and my father is doing hard labor. So I see this kind of clothes he's wearing, and and it's very formative, and with this poet, Chile poet, and Pablo Neruda. And seems he's very passionate and emotionally attached to this poet. But of course, he was in exile for 20 years. He cannot write a sentence. For quite long, he was doing hard labor. So Chile stayed in my mind as imagination. And in my home, there's a little poetry book about his trip to Chile. He wrote about 20 poems when in relate to that journey. Until last year, I had a chance to visit Latin America. So
you went to Isla Negra, no?
Huh?
You went to Isla Negra, where the house of Neruda is, no?
Oh yes, I brought my son. I want him to know. So we went this house next to the ocean, which my father always tell me, So I try to imagine the house because my father said it's a lot of collections. So we went into the house. It's really very much identical to what my father told me. And I found this sculpture. My father made a drawing in his diary book. And actually 2 objects I found. And for me it's a big surprise to find something 60 years ago. My father made those drawings. Of course, both of them passed away. And also I visited this Pablo Neruda's archive, foundation. They also have a lot of materials of photographs of Neruda and my father. So those things, for me, it's very interesting because think about South Americans' relation with China, and especially in communist China, there are still those third world nations are under the oppression of the capitalism, and so they have some kind of sympathy, or to see as some kind of allies.
Let me move to another thing. Your father wrote a poem that says, "Every wall is nothing but a vestige of history that no one cares to remember." A few months ago, you made a work in New York titled "Good Fences Make Good Neighbors." Is there a connection between your art and your father's poetry, or generally speaking, a connection with poetry and literature as such?
It's very hard for me even to be very clear about this. I think the literature or poetry certainly influenced me, but how it influenced, I really don't know. It's I never write poetry. I do writing in different styles, but not really poetry. And I would say literature and poetry's strongest influence to me.
Some time ago, you said that art is not an end, but just a beginning. Could you tell me what you mean by that?
I think art is never about to establish rather about questioning the establishment in aesthetic and to redefine our position in today's reality. So I don't think there's fixed art or permanent art condition, rather than to be prepared to ask new questions, and that's how I look at art.
During the first half of the 20th century, avant-garde took a very critical stand toward tradition. But your work, for example, what you have done with porcelain, seems to represent an effort to find a balance between tradition and innovation. For you, in what way traditional Chinese arts and craft are a source for the development of new forms of expression?
So, because maybe art functions different way in the West than in the East. In the West, art could be religious art, or later Renaissance art is all about so much in relating to the movement of human society in the way. So even the early 20th century art is so much related to scientific development and other issues in the development. But in the East, the art always seeing as a continuity of what has been done in the past. The knowledge, the skill, and the way to understanding the craftsmanship and material. All those are basically come from the past. So I think I'm quite benefited by both state of mind. I think to learn how human being or artist work in the past, how those struggles or those intellect being shown in the past as a very important resource for so-called new development. So that's why I always fascinated by what had been done and how people, not just skill, but rather how people interpret those issues or those topics. To understand it, then that's possible to change the narrative or to reinterpret a certain condition.
Thinking of your documentary Human Flow, which deals with the drama of refugees, it is obvious that your work has a strong humanitarian concern. This leads me to ask, what do you feel the relationship between ethics and aesthetics should be, and how to avoid the risk of reducing art to the single role of a moral forum?
I think if you think about contemporary art, it can break any rules. So why should we worry about to just reduce so-called ethics to moral or reduce aesthetic to ethics? Come on, we should not fear about anything, right? There's no boundary or border for how should we practice. I think the pure, so-called pureness about art or aesthetics is simply a bourgeois idea of the 19th or 20th century. Art for art's sake, which I think is it never been like that. Even that idea shows a strong political gesture. I think it's basically, I think it's a lie. Art always reflects human struggle, always reflects our state of mind, and that always reflects our philosophy. So I would never worry about it. I think art should relate to humanity, human rights, freedom of speech. Those are very fundamental stones for art can exist.
By now, you have become a public celebrity. I mean, your use of Instagram or Twitter is voracious, that you mix everything from dramatic situations to ordinary ones, from public issues to intimate moments. How do you think that social networks or the universal and instantaneous accessibility to photography by smartphones have changed the way critical thinking is carried out and contemporary art, especially your work, is produced and received?
Here, in dealing with two issues, one is so-called contemporary art. And now we talk about contemporary art, we only talk about what has been made. And, through university education, through some kind of popular aesthetic judgment, normally, but there's no limitation for so-called contemporary art to explore. Otherwise, we cannot call it contemporary art. Even contemporary politics or contemporary anything which never followed any kind of doctrine or formula. So to just think contemporary art has some kind of formula is ridiculous. It's really market thinking or some kind of mainstream. My practice is now come to my practice. My practice is never really designed. It's never really a strategy, but rather as an individual who has some art skills, loves poetry or maybe I couldn't even define. Maybe fascinated by art practice. With certain kind of knowledge about both East and West, classic or modern. And but focus on the issues of contemporary men or women's daily life. Could be political, could be personal, could be language problem, could be some kind of argument in aesthetic or moral or even philosophical conditions. So all those mixed, and in dealing with very specific questions, could be earthquake, could be migration, could be a judicial case, also could be one article or one common trend design. So I never really care about contemporary art or not. It's a person's practice, I think, with openness and honesty and indirect confrontation. So as a result, certain so-called product come out. We call it artworks, but it could be a painting or could be an interview or really to be a painting actually, installation or wallpaper or maybe a film or maybe a video piece, or most effort I made in past 10 years, which I had my major exhibition since 2014, so it's about 14 years of practice. Most effort, 90% effort I made is on internet. It's not because I want to relate my art to internet. It's just I'm interested in the phenomenon of internet. An individual can acquire his own knowledge and information and communicate independently. So that never happened in China, and I think never happened in the human society. So only when internet become technically provides this kind of possibility. So as a result, people start thinking, this guy getting maybe well known, but that's not what I'm interested in. I don't care, I appreciate the effort people can see or can be aware of what I'm doing, but that's not my purpose. My argument is always valid. It's better than myself, and I like to argue with anybody at any kind of topic. And that's what I enjoy.
Bringing things again to contemporary art, I wonder who are the artists, dead or alive, that inspire you? Have they changed over time? Duchamp seems to have been important when you live in New York. Do you regard him as an artist relevant in the context of your new concerns?
At the beginning of my practice, of course, there are certain people who I feel they're more relevant than others. One I've been mentioning is Duchamp, because it's not about his work. It's once again he put the so-called art to serve the mental activity rather than visual presentation. So I think that fit into my understanding of the art. He said he's very much influenced by poetry rather than art. He said he hates French sentence about a stupid as artist, which I totally agree. I think most artists are stupid. Maybe because they are stupid, they become artists, and maybe because they become artists and stupid, they are valuable. So, this is could be contradiction. But only a few artists are very intelligent, very alert, and can put the mental activity and to work in so-called field of art. Very few.
Thinking in Latin American art, I mean, which despite its quality, is placed more or less in a marginal position in the art world scene. Do you follow any Latin American artist?
I never followed, I'm sorry, it's not, I never followed a Latin American artist. I generally not followed any artist. And, it's very, very often, there's not much to say there.
Last question. Could you tell me which of the works exhibited here in CorpArtes is most significant?
In here?
Yes.
You mean in my work?
Here, in this exhibition, in this particular exhibition.
I don't think anything is significant. In my studio, I don't, like any other artist's studio, I don't show any of my work. Because I simply am not interested in my work. I'm always interested in the next work, because the next work is always attractive to me. Once it's been done, for me it's not so interesting. So.
Okay. Ai Weiwei, thanks for your time.
Thank you. It's so far it's the best interview I did. I did 4 or 5 today, but none of them are so interesting.